so we're doing 4 books. These for the first video. Again, if I mash this up, then it's all one, but whatever. I'll film an intro just in case. And the first 3 are books that I'm like, I like them. And then the last book that I film about is going to be The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, which is a masterpiece, and it's fantastic. If you want my quick thing about this book, read it. Read it. It is literarily challenging. It is incredibly well written. It is a narrative that comes together in the very end, but also is very much followable and interesting throughout the entire thing. It's intensely unique. The voice of it is amazing. Read this. Read this. The other thing is I am going to be definitely spoiling in light ways these books. As I review them. But really I want to kind of give just like a, what were my thoughts and should you read them? In my perfect world, we would do an Eclectic ASMR book club or something like that. I would really like to do something in that realm, but we'll see. But this year continues to be an incredibly productive reading year for me. I am far and away above my book a month thing. I think this book here, and then, dear, I'm getting a lot of text messages. I'm gonna put that on silent. There we go. I believe I'm 3 over my book a month thing, which I guess this being September the 9th month, well, unless I don't finish the book that I'm reading right now until the new year, I will for sure be over a book a month this year. I reviewed every single book that I have read this year. I need to go back and see which order I have read them in, but I know this is the book that I was reading around, I think like April, May, kind of. Because, yeah, I would say around April, May or something like that. But we're going to go from my least favorite to my favorite book of this list of 4, I should say. Although my favorite is Fifth Season, obviously. But really I didn't dislike any of these books. It's just that some of them were a little bit more than others. So, that being said, we're going to talk about The Shadow of What Was Lost. This is by James Islington, or Islington. I'm not sure. But this book, I have had this for a very long time. I have had this probably since 2015, 16-ish or something like that. Yeah, I think so. And this book, I just decided to pick it up because I have The Will of the Many, which is James Islington's or Islington's newest book, which is also a series which is incredibly well reviewed and hyped, and people say it's amazing. So I thought, well, I'll take my first dip into the waters of James Islington, and I kind of regret it. This has made me not more apprehensive about The Will of the Many, but it's made me less immediately excited to pick it up. This book is 685 693 pages, so closing in on 700 pages, and boy does a lot happen, and boy does not a lot happen either. There are no stakes for this world that are delivered upon within 700 pages, within 693 pages, that I find particularly compel me to read the second book. Because this book is more so, I would say, about establishing characters, which I think is fine if these characters were not like these characters are very juvenile. I don't know what's the best way to describe it, but from the beginning, essentially, in this world, the magic users lost a war around 20 years ago, and the sort of like the more powerful magic users were completely offed, like they were killed, and the government is on the lookout for more that would be born so that they can kill them. And then the magic users, who are just sort of regular magic users, are kept separate from society. They are sort of a discriminated against class, and there's magical laws that enforce this. It's not as though like, oh well, what's keeping these magic users low? Like, they have powers, what's stopping them? There's literal magic rules that govern the land that prevent them from ever doing anything to harm anybody who isn't magic. And so these laws are there to kind of keep this world order in place. I'm going to read this out from the back. It has been 20 years since the godlike augurs were overthrown and killed. Those who once served them, the gifted, were spared only after accepting the rebellion's 4 tenets, which vastly limited their powers. The augurs killed, the gifted are kept as sort of an underclass, and they are bound in that sort of status by literal magic laws. Tavian suffers the consequences of a war lost before he was even born. When he discovers that he wields the forbidden power of the augurs, he sets into motion a chain of events that will change everything. To the west, a young man whose fate is intertwined with Tavian's awakes in a forest covered in blood with no memory of who he is. And in the far north, an ancient enemy begins to stir. This book is just travel, really. There is time involved in limited capacity in this book, but as I understand it, when you get into the sequel, I think the time stuff becomes a little bit more important. And the idea behind the magic system here is that it's kind of like an energy use system. Like, there is energy in the world that the gifted can pull on, and the augurs themselves, they're able to pull on a different energy source. If you have ever watched Hunter x Hunter, or Hunter x Hunter, I never know how to explain it, this is like the difference between like your regular skills and Nen. There is like the gifted who have like this ever so slightly poorly defined magic. It seems to be a little bit vague, because it seems as though like we've lost some of the knowledge or something like that, but the augurs, they pull on something different, a different power source, and really it's explained in such obtuse and roundabout ways that you can't get it. And it's definitely there, but it's not gripping. It's not like the Powder Mage trilogy, for example, where the magic is like, oh my god, like this is cool. It's really well discussed, but the vague parts of it are still left vague. This feels like it was given the time and thought. It's just that I'm not privy to those thoughts. And the other thing is that the characters are just, they are so unique. Definitely, it's not like elves and dwarves and things like that. But it's more so like Davian, for example. He's just like average Joe, can't use his powers. He's a little bit like, he's a little bit of a loser, kind of, but he's nice enough, and he works hard and he studies, but he just can never figure out his powers. But then all of a sudden, he's an augur, and he can, like, he's important, and he's pulled back in time, and he comes back, and it's like, it just feels like it doesn't feel earned in a way. That's really why I think the characters are so weak, is because everything happens to them. There is decision making on the part of Davian and Weir, his best friend, Wirr, but it's done at either the deception of other characters is why they make these decisions. Meanwhile, Davian should be able to detect deception, but joke's on you, he can't. Because there are some people out there who know how to mask it. Oh, but joke's on them. He can, because he can learn how to get around the tricks of the people who can mask it. And that is a great example of why I don't enjoy this book, because really, it can come up with an explanation of why it didn't work for Davian at one point, and then it can come up with an explanation of why it now will work for him at any point. And I find that it undermines a reader's trust in some way. Like, for example, one of the main female characters, Asha, she has her powers ripped away from her by force. It's a very traumatic process. But it turns out there's a way that she can actually have powers. And it's like, okay, I get it. But I feel like we're robbing some of the effect of the change that she went through. The first scene in this book is where we see one of these students getting their powers forcibly taken away, and it is intensely traumatic. And so when you realize that she's had this done to her, it's like, holy shit, like this is terrible. Fast forward, it's like, oh, well, I guess it didn't really matter that much, you know? So I feel like goalposts can definitely shift. And the fact that nobody knows about the magic system of the augurs very well, you can kind of just expect that there's going to be some randomness invented. Like, for example, nobody is able to survive time travel on their first attempt without any training, but Davian just does, because he's that girl. Like, why? He's not an exceptionally well-studied student. It's not like he has knowledge of these weird, esoteric, ancient secrets. Meanwhile, they're only 20 years old secrets. You feel like somebody'd have a book, you know? It's like, it would be like suddenly losing the knowledge of how to use dial-up internet. It's like, well, I feel like we would still know. Like, there are people who are still alive from before the augurs were killed, you know? And maybe that knowledge is not taught, but I feel like it should be more well understood. And Weir is like this hyper-capable, hyper-chivalric, and that kind of goes to his character, because eventually it's revealed that he's the son of a royal. But it really doesn't come from anywhere other than that, and he's a very one-note character. He shows up and he's a good friend. Oh, and he's a prince. Cool. Caden is the other one who is just mysterious for the whole book until at the very end, it seems as though he's a villain. Maybe. But then the book ends, and you're like, oh. It doesn't really inspire me to continue to read into the next book because I don't really care about Caden because he's just been mysterious this whole time, and now, hey, he's maybe evil, or maybe he's misguided evil because he once worked with the ancient evil lord up north. Again, it's just all the Asha is probably my favorite character in the book because she is somebody who has had something so horrible done to her, and she's actually able to be very capable and very able to, like, keep her agency. She should be the least powerful character in this book, yet she manages to circumvent that, which I think is really interesting, and I think that's a really, it would almost make me wonder if that's a theme. Like, if she is the sleeper protagonist of this series, I don't think I'd be upset, because I think that that whole idea of, like, we're kind of told that the gifted need their powers back, the augurs need to be back because there's this ancient threat on the horizon, and it's actually, like, pretty cool that we might actually get, like, the four tenets changed, and we might get their sort of discriminated status reversed to some effect. But I think Asha kind of defines a pivot from that and a contradiction of that thought process, which I really like. And I think that is a theme that I could get on board with. Kind of a subversion of those expectations. But in 700 pages, the fact that we don't get much of substance happening other than the invasion, I feel like it's so much work for so little payoff. Now, there is a lot of interpersonal stuff that happens. There are reveals that happen. You do kind of want to know what's going on, but then by the end of the book, it's like, well, the payoffs really aren't that satisfying to me. So am I really going to purchase and read through another potentially 700-ish page book? I think there's better things that I can do with my time. There's better books that I can spend my time on. And that's kind of just what it is. It's just kind of like, what's the point? And the other thing that I find just grating about this book, absolutely, like, every single time it came up, and it comes up a lot, I just groan. It's like, really, it's that every single time a male character and a female character are together in this book, it's like a flush runs through my face. She's pretty in that country sort of way, and it's like, holy shit, like, it is aggressively heterosexual, and that's a me thing, but I just, like, who cares? I'm sorry to anybody who's heterosexual in my audience, but the way it's done in this book, I have read heterosexual romances, and they are done well, and I like them. I find them compelling. This, it's just like a 15-year-old boy would read this and be like, that's how I feel about the women that I, like, am interested in my life. Meanwhile, these people are in their very late teens, like 18 to 19. I think Davian is actually 16, so maybe that's thematically appropriate, but some of these characters are older, and it's like, really? Like, Davian's every single girl. It is like he gets bumped into in a market and he's like, oh, by a woman, a girl. I don't know how old she is. They never say, but he's like, oh, like he thinks, oh, well, she's pretty, and then he meets the princess, and she's also pretty, and he never stops fucking thinking about Asha, because Asha is his, like, he is infatuated, and it's like, this is just annoying. It's not cute. It's not, like, it's just, really, dude, like, get a hold of it. And maybe it's compelling to people who are heterosexual, or compelling to people who read more like this, but I think there's a way to do it much better, because every single time a man like Caden and the princess, they have like an implied thing going on. Meanwhile, it's not built on anything except physical attraction, and it's like, pay me to care. Maybe I'm being rude. Maybe it is really well written, but it is just like, put it back in your pants, kid. Like, anyway, again, maybe a 15-year-old boy would read it and find something relatable about that. Like a heterosexual 15-year-old boy might be like, oh yeah, I see a lot of myself in Davian, but for me it's just juvenile. But then sometimes Davian is 16 and incompetent and not worldly, and then sometimes he's like shockingly mature and knows what to do, and it's like, I don't think we necessarily have it pinned down where a Davian is. Is he as capable and competent as a 22-year-old, or is he as wet behind the ears as a 16-year-old? Give me something. And it's not a straight arc. Sometimes he's mature and sometimes he's not. Again, maybe this just isn't the book for me. If you enjoy this book, I am really happy for you, because I do think that there is a lot to enjoy here. For my taste, I think it just stretches things a little bit too far without acting on those things. I feel like you could accomplish a lot with this world, with this magic system, with these characters in 700 pages, and I don't think it accomplishes even half of that. And sure, maybe that's just my personal preference. I think it is. I think this book probably justifiably receives a lot of praise, but for me, it's just not it. And really, honestly, I can't believe I feel terrible saying this, but it is that, like, very prevalent heterosexuality that sometimes really, like, rips me out of it, where I'm like, no, I don't want to hear about that. And I'm not a prude, I swear to God. I read The Pairing by Casey McQuiston, and I found it, that is a good romance. That's fantastic, and it's very erotic. This, cringe, I think, at least. But if I were to recommend something for this book, it is to, like, either pack way more in here, get more into the Dark Lord up north, reveal whatever the fuck is going on with Caden's character, remove like 90% of the travel, and just give me the highlights, and then also flesh out the magic system a little bit more. I need that, and give more screen time to Asha. The other thing that I would suggest is, like, chop 200 pages off this thing and tighten it up in that way. Remove some of the travel stuff, get more into the magic, get more into the discrimination, make it really palpable. Let me feel for Davian as, like, a young man who has never known not being discriminated. He's never known freedom. And really get into that. Like, what does he yearn for? What does this kid want beyond great makes him feel other than the perpetual hard-on that he has for Asha. Because I understand that can guide teenage boys through a good amount of decision making, for sure, but not all of it. And this really boils him down, I think, in a way that is reductive to his character, rather than productive to his character. If I were to read this book, if I'm talking about, like, percentages, I think this year, for me, the pairing and the fifth season easily are at, hindsight, 100% for me, out of like what I enjoy about them. This is like a solid 45. And if you remove that awkward sort of romantic air to it, I think that you could bump it up to a 55. It's just too much for too little, I think. I don't know if I'm going to read the sequel. If it's on sale, maybe. But honestly, I don't care to. It just doesn't grip me. I am more excited for The Will of the Many because I think that author who wrote that can really tighten things up and make The Will of the Many a really good book, and I've heard amazing things about it, and it is similar in length. So I'm hoping that there was a lot of improvement on that formula from The Shadow of What Was Lost, and then hopefully more comes of The Will of the Many. So next, like I said, we're kind of going in order of my favorites, and that is probably there's a huge gap between The Shadow of What Was Lost and Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune. This one I actually read one book ago, but I'm actually going to stop the recording here for just a second because my laundry is done, and I'll be back soon. So, in the immortal words of Melissa Edwards, I am back again, and we're about to discuss Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune. I have currently misplaced the book jacket on this one, so I'm not quite sure where it is, but first of all, this cover, very sweet. I like normally I'm neither here nor there on like embossing. I think that's what this is, like placing something on the like decorative on the hardcover, but I think it really works for this novel. Like, this is a like stark jet black hardcover. It's not like navy. I don't know if the light is really playing on it, but there's like this shell that's in gold on the front, and the edges of the pages are sprayed, which is kind of interesting. It does make the pages hard to turn, I will say that, but nothing that a quick, like, if you take the book and do this, it would fix it right up. But this is a sequel to The House on the Cerulean Sea, and on the book jacket it is still in T.J. Klune's seemingly like house style for these more grounded human novels to have like almost it's like a paper cardboard photo that's really, really cool. Like, look at T.J. Klune's book cover art, specifically in The Lives of Puppets. That is a perfect book cover. It looks so great, and you can tell it's like that cardboard constructed photo taken in like a uniquely lit area. It looks like an old children's show kind of look. It's perfect, and this continues with that theme. And like I said, it's a sequel to a book that didn't really need a sequel, in my opinion. I understand where Books Lost gets like a 45% from me. This sits at like a 60 to 65%. Yes, I stand by that. Because this novel, I am happy that I got to spend more time with these characters. Immensely. Like, this is like the House on the Cerulean Sea is fantastic, amazing. This book, I would say, is good. It's good. It's maybe going towards great. It's just that it really again, I don't think that this story needed a follow-up. There were threads that you could follow up on, and I think DJ Clune has done a decent job of building on them, but it would be like doing a sequel to Under the Whispering Door by DJ Clune, if you've ever read that. That is such a neat, succinct package. And Cerulean Sea was also a really neat, succinct package, and it told its story and it communicated its themes perfectly. Belonging, the magic in the ordinary, literal found family, parenting, queer parenting, parenting of queer children, all that kind of stuff. I think it does it beautifully. This book expands, but it expands in ways that really didn't need expanding, and it adds a lot of very on-the-nose political messaging. And I am a huge fan of political messaging in novels like this. This book is very openly pro-trans. It's very openly allowing queer children to be themselves and not legislating upon them. It's very, very, very good at, like, communicating those. I just think that the delivery of these messages is very, like, queer kids deserve rights. But and that's it. There are many, many moments of, like, the villain is comically evil, and it's like, it's very Saturday morning cartoon, like, take that, evil bad guy. And I think that TJ Clune is, I don't think that TJ Clune is necessarily selling their skills at political commentary very well with this book, because TJ Clune, I think, did a lot of very nuanced work in The House on the Cerulean Sea. This one is much more openly like, you should just let kids be kids. Let kids do their thing. Yeah. Again, and that's it. I think that this novel is needed. This novel is perfect if you are a family and you have, say, 2 female parents, 2 male parents, a trans child, a trans parent, if there are queer members of your family and your children are like 10 years old or something like that, and like I said, you are a gay couple, you are a lesbian couple, you are a queer couple raising this child, I think that this book is gorgeous for that, because the themes in here are absolutely graspable and immediately understandable by kids that age. I just think that this is a little too heavy-handed and a little too on the nose for adult readers. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. agency that is responsible for legislating magical adults and magical children. And is that a win? Absolutely. But it also acknowledges that that institution in and of itself is the perpetrator of violence against the magical community. So naturally, you need to be apprehensive of that apparatus, no matter who is at the helm. It's the same thing as it's very clearly like criticizing and throwing into contrast American institutions or Canadian institutions, at least in my context, where absolutely there are government agencies who are helmed by people who mean the absolute best and who want to dismantle systems of control and oppression. But the fact that they have those institutions, is that institution not oppressive in and of itself, no matter who is leading it? I think this book does a great job at making you think about that kind of thing, and that's why I think this book is a fantastic family read. Same thing with Cerulean Sea, although Cerulean Sea, I don't know if it's as accessible to children because of its focus on Linus and its focus on later in life embracing of your queer identity and embracing of your normalness, your ordinariness. I think there are a lot of queer people who are young adults to adults who would find Cerulean Sea really, really affirming. This one, I think, strays far younger, which is not a bad thing. It's just, for my own personal opinion, maybe not my favorite TJ Klune entry ever. Perfectly fine. That's alright. That is my opinion. Now, plot. I think that this book, in being so heavy-handed, kind of loses a little bit of its... It doesn't lose its charm. Its charm is wonderful, but, I mean, there's only so many times that Chauncey can, spray ink and have that land in the same comedic and charming way. By the last time he sprays ink, it's like, okay, Chauncey can create ink. Chauncey can speak to fish. So Chauncey can speak to fish. Awesome. Love it. Again, I think this comes from the far younger tone and younger target audience of this book than it does of it actually being bad. I don't think that this book is bad in any way. I think it's just my enjoyment of it was affected by the tone of it. Same thing with Lucy, who is Lucifer, like the Antichrist. There are many, 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 many times where he threatens to turn somebody inside out, kill people, all that kind of stuff. And it's cute, it's charming. It really, this also does, I think, a good job of depicting how to help children who are maybe a little bit who misunderstand what is socially appropriate. I think it depicts them in a very kind and loving and understanding way, and it depicts the parenting of them in a very mature way. It's just that after mention number 10 of Lucy enacting violence on somebody, I'm like, okay, his character wants to enact violence, but his whole thing is that he overcomes it. And I think he has the greatest amount of character growth There's nobody on earth who wants to kidnap trans children in order to utilize them to rule the world. I think it would be far, far, far better to have a villain, and there are shades of this in there, but to have a villain that really, truly, fully means the best. Like, in every way, shape, and form, loves the kids, finds them to be as full of potential as Arthur and Linus do, but through the running of the organization, completely misses the point, fully perpetuates the oppression and perpetuates the violence carried out against these children. I think that would be far more interesting, but that's where this book, I think, TJ Klune, at the end, in the acknowledgements, says that he wants to be perceived as the anti-J.K. Rowling. And I completely understand that. The only thing is that the main villain is named Janine Router. And she wants to kidnap the Antichrist to take over the world for her own evil ambitions in order to eradicate trans magical people who are the allegory for the queer community. And while fully do I believe that J.K. Rowling thinks that our community needs eradication, I think so. But I feel like the Janine Router minimizes the danger of somebody like J.K. Rowling. I think, like I said, you could have a far more nuanced discussion of people like her with a character that begins the story meaningfully well and drives down a path of evil and is at the point of no return, sunk cost fallacy, does end up becoming that type of evil, sick person that J.K. Rowling is. I think that would be a far more nuanced take, and I think that would be something that TJ Klune would have written. I'm just ever so slightly confused as to why TJ Klune went the route that he did. And I think I fully respect the route that he did go. I think it displays the sort of ridiculousness of anti-queer ideology in the way that people like J.K. Rowling conceive of it and do activism for anti-activism. But I think it's just ever so slightly not quite where it needs to be for a TJ Klune book. And that's, I think, my greatest issue with it. But really, if you, like I said, are the parent of queer children, if you are queer parents of any children, you should get this and read it with them, and honestly, get Cerulean Sea and read it with them. Cerulean Sea might fly over their heads a little bit more, but truly, it is a great, great series to get your kids. It's like the Extraordinaries series. If you have queer teen children, or if you are, again, queer parents with teenaged young adult children, The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune, that set of 3 books, fabulous, fantastic. Cerulean Sea and Somewhere Beyond the Sea, same idea, except I think this one would be better, like I said, with that, tween, aged 9 to 13 sort of area. I think this would really, really land well. This would be a great first, full-length chapter novel for your kids. I think this could be used in schools, absolutely, because it's so good at communicating the points that it wants to communicate, if at times being a little heavy-handed. But character-wise, everybody's really on point. Some things do happen just because they happen. Sometimes, sometimes they make the inspector character grow a mustache, and that makes her like super wacky, uncomfortable, and it's kind of like, okay. But I think that the tone is definitely for younger readers. So for me, like a 65. For younger readers, we're at like an 85 to a 90. And if you're reading it as a family where you can discuss the themes and things like that, 100% fabulous. If you are in my scenario where you're just a single queer person and you don't have children, it's decent, but it's not like oh my god, you have to read this like Cerulean Sea is. I also think that maybe this would be really good reading for teachers who are wondering how to approach queer children or neurodivergent children. But again, I wouldn't use this as like gospel. I would do professional development, but this is good supplementary stuff for that kind of thing. So, very, very good. I enjoy TJ Klune. Other than his Wolf series, I haven't touched that, but TJ Klune is, I would say, a must-buy for me. It's like Casey McQuiston. Just a complete must-buy for sure, like Becky Chambers for me, or Brian McClellan, or something like that. Like, TJ Klune has made it into that. Oh, and also, speaking of a must-buy author, but yeah, TJ Klune occupies that spot for me, and he should for you, if you agree a lot with my book videos and my taste in video books, in my videos in general. But speaking of must-buy authors, hello Bethany Jacobs. This is On Vicious Worlds, and this is another sequel. On Vicious Worlds is a sequel to These Burning Stars, and this one is easily my second favorite out of the 4 that are in this video. This book is fantastic. This book is amazing. These Burning Stars, I was really worried that the second novel wouldn't be able to continue with tension and the tension building and the themes of the previous book. This book manages to do that and more in, I think, a much shorter time frame. Or no, well, kind of an equivalent time frame, but manages to do everything that the first book did, but with far less that actually happens, which is really interesting. This book, it clocks in at, so 439, so 200 pages less than The Shadow of What Was Lost. This is what I mean when James Islington could have easily cut 200 pages from the book and still shoved in so much of what he wanted to write, and it would be done, I think, in a more succinct and much better way. This is a great example of that. Nothing goes to waste. A single scene doesn't go to waste. Absolutely nothing. The characters are perfect. Amazing. The way that Bethany Jacobs has iterated on their entire universe and themes of collective trauma and racism and histories of oppression. Again, I think I have a theme of what I read. I think it's done so well, and it's done in a way that this book makes me feel a little bit like I am reading a new Star Wars type thing. It's not quite as grand and galactic as Star Wars is, but the characters are just as compelling. The world and the universe are just as compelling. They're interesting. You are really invested in this world and the people and like even the population at large of these planets and these systems. You really feel integrated into. You really feel the government structure. Like, I imagine this is what it's way more in depth than the Empire was back in things that go on, down to the economy and the lengths that governments will go to cover atrocities, the lengths that governments will go to in terms of committing those atrocities in the name of resource wealth and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's fantastic. This novel is, it's so good. It's so good. Read this. Read these Burning Stars. Read On Vicious Worlds. Read this. And now I'm gonna spoil it. So, this one is set 8 months after the initial, 8 months after the conclusion of the last book. And this book begins in a very slow place. It almost feels like a reset, because you would think after the last book that the Givenni, they would sort of be in a really stable place. You would think that the Treble, after Six and Chono return, I thought that would be kind of where it goes and what happens to the Treble. No. In fact, I would almost say that the protagonist is the Givenni people themselves, other than Mazar and Jun Ironway and all that. But essentially, there are disappearances going on and very high-profile murders going on at the new Givenni settlement of Fair and Ice. And back in the Treble, Six and Chono are just arriving in order to sort of shake things up. And the two halves of the story really don't play into each other very much. Sorry, my back. Need to crack it. They don't really play into each other very much until the very end, which I think is really cool, because there's some interesting time stuff going on where the Six and Chono plot line are happening a couple months ahead of the Fair and Ice plot line, which I think works out really well in the end. The Fair and Ice plot line, you really get this sense of innocence lost, and you really get a sense of, like, what can utopia look like? What should utopia look like? And can you even achieve a society without policing, without weapons, without a prison system, like without a system of sort of just like incarceratory punishment? What does that look like? And what happens when things start going wrong? Is the nature of people one that is sort of leaning toward violence and distrust and greed, I would say. And it comes down to revenge, in a way, at the very end of it. And very petty, young style revenge in a very, again, innocence lost kind of way, both for the colony and the government of Fair and Ice and the Givenni people and the characters involved. But anyway, Jun and Mazar are tasked with finding out who is killing a lot of the collectors, who are kind of a special task force in a way for the Givenni people, who are kind of exploring a new role in a society without weapons, and a society without sort of police, law enforcement type roles. And essentially, the colony in Fair and Ice has some people who do not want to be there because of the events of the conclusion of the last book. I'll let you read it so that you can get into it, but basically, there are some people who are there, maybe not against their will, but they were uprooted very quickly and brought there because of some very unfortunate circumstances. So there's a little bit of unrest going on, and all of these disappearances are happening, all of these murders are happening, weirdnesses with the power grid, and Jun and Mazar are trying to figure out how they are going to sort of figure it out. And after a lot of figuring out, serious than we would seem to think in the first book and in the beginning of this second book, and has kind of instilled a resentment toward the Jeveni in Jun's family, the Ironways. And at the very end, it really explores what this society that believes they have done what they need to do to abolish prisons, abolish law enforcement. What happens when that society runs up against something like terrorism, something like a very direct threat to their way of life and their safety and their people? And where does that society go after those events happen? And then the other loss of innocence is very, very much in Jun's cousins, because at the very end of the day, they are young, they are impressionable, and they're angry, and they've done things that legitimately endanger everybody that they have left in the world. And that's really difficult for them to go through, and it leads them down very dark paths, and finally it leads them to the breaking point. I will say there are mentions, and very overt mentions, of suicide, death by suicide in this book, so keep that in mind, but I think it's handled in a very realistic way, and it's also handled with the heaviness that it needs to be handled with, like the gravity that kind of subject matter deserves. Bethany Jacobs definitely gives that topic the gravity that it deserves. That's what I'm trying to say. And then on the other side of the plot, in the Treble, Six and Chono return, and they basically expose the Treble and the Kingdom, which is the government, for all that they are. They committed a genocide against the Jeveni people in order to keep control over resource wealth. They keep those people imprisoned, and when some 5,000 of the Jeveni returned to the Treble because they did not want to be in Farin Ice, they actually imprisoned them and forced them into labor camps as political prisoners. And so Six and Chono come back to a very destabilized situation, a Treble that is ready to revolt against the Kingdom, and they are captured by Kingdom agents, and it just walks through their imprisonment. They're making deals with the Treble government in order to try to navigate getting the Jeveni released, while also attempting to navigate a very close to open rebellion. Sorry for the abrupt cut and exit. It's a day later. One of my neighbors, they brought some sort of party outdoors into their backyard, and you could definitely hear the voices. They were being very loud, but that is okay. But I believe I left off with what Chono and Six were doing, and it basically tests Chono herself. What the fuck does she want? What is her life post service to a repressive government? It's quite a mature handling of somebody who was once an agent of this wildly repressive system, and what they are doing to make amends, but then also to what extent can they? To what extent does she feel as though she is obligated to, and all that? So it's very interesting, and the exploration of the relationship that she has with Six and all that is just very well handled. It's a very slow-moving part of the book for the most part. It is a lot of politicking and outsmarting and all that kind of stuff, so if you like that, you'll definitely enjoy this. I think you'd enjoy These Burning Stars more, because this one has a lot less overt outsmarting, and a lot more putting these characters into situations where they are pushed to the limits. I think that this is a very good professionals under distress type narrative, where these people are generally the people who are at the top of their game, essentially, and then putting them in situations that There isn't a single sentence that is unused. There is no filler whatsoever here. It's just, it is a very, 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 very good book. Bethany Jacobs is an incredible author. I know this series is a debut for them. These Burning Stars is their debut novel. Wild to me if you told me that Bethany Jacobs was some sort of pen name for a storied science fiction writer. I would not be surprised, even though there is a photo of Bethany Jacobs. Maybe there's not. Okay, maybe there's not a photo of Bethany Jacobs. Conspiracy theory. JK, I don't actually think that. Let's see. No. Oh, it also has a couple of previews for. Oh yeah, it does have a photo of Bethany Jacobs in there. This one is very much following in my kind of pledge. Not really a serious thing, but this one follows with my desire to only read books with queer content in them. Of course, The Shadow of What Was Lost does not follow that, which infuriated me, but this also contains that very evolved views on what gender could look like in the future, and how what I really, really enjoy is that there is less so in this book. Well, no, that's not true. There are in these Burning Stars and on Vicious Worlds, this one, there are sparse sex scenes, but there are them there. There are scenes like that present. But what I absolutely love is that there are mentions, but not explicit confirmations of what genitalia these characters have, which is intensely refreshing. I love it because it allows me to fill in what, who these people could be, who are they, and it's just great, and the queerness and transness of some characters is not treated with a damage to them. They're treated very much like just a regular part of the fabric of this society, which is great. There's mention of some discrimination, but it is very naturalistic. It's not like, everybody stop, the trans character is discriminated against. No, that doesn't happen. Oh dear, my phone keeps buzzing. I'll turn it off again. No, that doesn't happen. It is just oh yeah, this is an example of what discrimination looks like in this world, and it's less widespread than it is in ours. Again, incredibly naturalistic, and despite being a plot line that also centers heavily on racism toward the Javeni, there is really not a centering of that in Javeni storylines. It's very much a thing that exists, but it doesn't define them, which I also think is very nice writing. It's it's writing about racism that doesn't fully just put it right in your face and say only people who experience racism, that's their only personality trait, or people who experience transphobia, that's their only plot line, that's their only character trait, and things like that. That's very much not how this is written, and I appreciate that intensely. But yeah, read this book, read the original. You simply must. I'm forcing you to. I'm sorry. Go out and purchase these. They are worth your time. If you're a science fiction fan, I don't know why you haven't read these already. Seriously, this is the evolution of the genre. I love it. Speaking of things that I absolutely love and that I'm fanatical for, the fifth season. I think that this is maybe going to be the shortest part of the review, despite the I think I said way long ago that this book deserves a, like its own video. It absolutely does. But now that I have spent probably around 5 months away from it or something like that, it's just simply a masterpiece. Full stop. This is post-apocalyptic fiction that takes place on 3 different timelines. One that is like during, it's not post-apocalyptic fiction, it is apocalyptic fiction. In a way, it's so good. But basically, it takes place on 3 different plot lines. 2 of them are pre-apocalypse, and one of them is happening during the apocalypse. And essentially, there are people in this world who can shape the earth, who have powers connected to controlling specifically earthquakes and plate tectonics. And it is very scientific in that way, which I think is incredibly unique for a fantasy novel. And they are heavily discriminated against. And through that, there is a character, and this happens at the very beginning, so I'm really not spoiling much. There is a character who I will not name because fabulous. When you figure out who it is, it's like, oh shit. And then when you also figure out who the main character is that we're following, you're like, holy shit. It's so good. Because you feel like you're following 3 different people, but are 2 of them the same? What is that one? Like, it's, oh my god, it's so good. But basically, it begins with a character deciding to use that power to end the world as people know it. And this world is actually one that is incredibly tectonically active, and so existence on this planet is very violent. And I think this is where it gets scientific, where I think that the speculative nature of this book, the genius of it, rests in, I believe one of the central questions of it is, what would living on a planet that is intensely tectonically active be like? So it's very interesting to explore that. Like what would it look like? What would it look like if very frequently, in like a centuries type scale, if a supervolcano just like effed up half the world? What would it look like if a tectonic event happened and it started raining sulfuric acid? What would that look like? What would a society have to be? And so you get like, this world is a very ancient one that is buried, or that is constructed on the buried bones of old civilizations that have ended because of these seasons. And when there's a particularly bad one, it's called a 5th season. And it's just genius because on top of all of this world building, you also get a very interesting character motivated narrative surrounding it. There is use of the second person. There is explorations of what the type of discrimination that people who can control these things face, because of course they're incredibly dangerous. What people can cause seasons to happen. So what does that world look like? What does it like? What do the people have to deal with? And then what do the people who are taken from their homes and sent to the main city to go get trained for their talents, what happens to them? And there's some very dark things that happen in this book, and there are very dark things that are mentioned in this book that are like, holy shit, like that's a lot going on. But I'm actually not going to spoil this one more than I already have. I've asked a couple of questions that will get you thinking about things that you start thinking about like probably halfway through this book. because it's just so easy to read. It has a little appendix at the back so you can understand things. There is a codification of all previous recorded seasons, a catalog of 5th seasons that have been recorded prior to and since the founding of the Sunset Equatorial Affiliation, from most recent to oldest. Very cool. So there's just a lot of world building. 449 pages, and my lord, does a lot happen, and a lot gets explained, and the characters are really, 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 really well explored. Fantastic. Go read this. Read it. Finish it. Read all 3. I have the Obelisk Gate and the Stone Sky. I am dying to read them. I probably will soon. I had just finished Day Boy, which I think I did a What Did I Buy from Indigo video a couple of weeks, months, maybe ago, and I got Day Boy. So I finished that, and I don't know. I'm reading a Becky Chambers book now, which is a sci-fi, so I don't know what I'm going to read after it, but I do have, like you can see, actually I'm looking at this shelf right here, on this shelf that's on this bookshelf in the mirror, and I'm just excited. I'm very excited. I have a lot of good books on it, so I'll see what I end up reading next. But I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I hope that you take my recommendation seriously, and just know that no matter what I say about these books, if you feel a different way about them, if you hate them, if you love them and I didn't like them, fine. That is perfectly okay. I have a YouTube channel, so I'm talking about my opinions, and naturally they're going to differ from some other people's, and I don't hold that against you. If you love The Shadow of What Was Lost, there are things to love about it. It's just, it wasn't for me, and that's perfectly okay. But just know that I don't think less of you, and you shouldn't think less of me for having differing opinions on things like that. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for being kind in the comments. And yeah, go read the 5th season. Go read both of Bethany Jacobs' books. Go read something from T.J. Klune. Cerulean Sea is definitely better than Somewhere Beyond the Sea, but I just like T.J. Klune. Again, these authors, like N.K. Jemisin is this one I don't think I mentioned. Those 3 authors are must-buys for me, and you know what? If The Will of the Many is really, really good, maybe James Islington will be a must-buy for me again as well, but